about the urban crisis and the possible solutions. The architecture that should be a generator of a new vision of city, but today we can see architecture reduced to banal architectures. Some of them just reflecting the real estate value or the mobility value of the place and the places that they are. So how do you suggest that architecture could be to have a better city?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure whether architects are the right persons for talking about the future of the city, because this is a societal question, and it needs a lot of alliances between politics and social workers and visionary cultural workers or cultural performers and studies and so on. And architects are only one of these. This is one answer. Another is, I think, I agree that the real estate industry and the building entrepreneurs are focusing very much on the economic value of their output. Sometimes they extend it to a cultural value in the sense of cultural economy and cultural cities in the competition of the cities worldwide. But this is a sort of producing iconic buildings for being very visible. It's not. It's less about life in the cities. And the third one is my understanding of architecture is, in fact, it's wider than focusing only on buildings, because I'm an urban designer, and as an urban designer, I'm coming from architectural design, and this is the background. For example, we try to explain in this book, which is unfortunately this one is in German, but we will soon edit an English version. It's about the architecture of the city, and this means that all this architectural approach you have to create environment is not reduced to the scale of the building. It's you can apply it as well on urban scale in different levels, from, let's say, the space between two buildings to public places, to the whole traffic system, and the question how you use the city and how you move through the city.
Also about this Nicht-Orte and that we have, and how can architecture can help to create a better atmosphere in the city if we have so many Nicht-Orte in the city?
I strongly believe in the power of architecture to create specific places. And of course, architecture as well can be used to produce Nicht-Orte in this sense of Marc-Anger, places which are the same everywhere in the world, so shopping malls or airports. So if you enter an airport from the air side, you easily find your way, because it's just organized in the similar way, and it's working with a lot of labels, signs to guide you. But architecture has, so of course this is a question of architecture as well, to produce these places. But architecture has on the other side, or far above that, the potential to create site-specific places. And I believe very much in this, and the quality of, or the capacity of architecture to increase the specificity of places, which has much to do with the culture of a place, the history of a place, and the, let's say, the site-specific potential from the natural features around inside the place. This could be a connection to your main question of research, cities and rivers. So a river is always one of the great features which can adorn a city to a very specific place. And even small rivers do that. So I know, for example, Frankfurt, the city of Frankfurt, just to have an example from this country. Frankfurt is called Frankfurt am Main. The Main is the river, and in fact it's quite a small river. It's a side river to the Rhine River, which is one of the biggest in this country. And the Main River is, I think, formerly when the city was founded, from history it has been an old city. That was even used this river for ships and loads, and nowadays quite unimportant in this sense. But the old city center is adjacent to the river, and then there are some bridges for cars and for people just walking. And on the other side, the south side, the quarter on the south side is an old residential commercial center, and is even called in German, it's a very nice word, Drittebach. This means opposite the river, but it's in a local dialect. Drittebach means drüben vom Bach. Yeah, this is just an example. And we have a lot of smaller rivers in our cities which are formerly didn't play a role in the cityscape or in the landscape of the city because they are near to the mountains, and then they have always been dangerous. So in history they were dangerous because in summer they have nearly no water. In winter or in spring, after when the snow is melting, then they have a lot of water. So that is these different qualities over the year makes it difficult to deal with the river. So in the 19th century they were somehow channelized, and then so they were never seen as something as a visual and atmospheric quality of the city. They're just functional features for traffic, loads, and so on. But this changes in all the cities. Even the cities which have these smaller rivers try to use them now for incorporating then the open spaces of it. And so this can be a source of individual, specific, site-specific quality. This, of course, in my sense, is a question of the architecture of a city, how these inner free spaces, borders, and shores of the river banks can be incorporated in this system of open and closed and dense and free atmosphere.
And talking about the day-to-day life, and the urban space is a scenery to the day-to-day life. Sometimes a scenery is just a place that you pass by. And what I want to talk about is how the scenery can be an active scenery, like the people were not just being there, but they are acting in this place. So what about the architecture of the city, and how can it improve our
It has a lot of it has a strong connection to the architectural quality of a place, but it is not only about that. So it has to do with the cultural behavior in a city, and this has to do a lot to do with the, let's say, the cultural standard of behaving in the city in a certain period of our times. So, for example, when I was studying, there were no street coffees in this country. Yeah, so they always were saying, no, that's something the Italians do. So you can go travel there for holidays, then you can go in a street coffee. In our country, it's too cold. It's impossible. Yeah? So meanwhile, some decades later, you are happy if you see a street in the city center without a street coffee, because they are everywhere, even in winter they put some heating and some blankets to be out. So people love to be outside. So it has changed a lot. And this is in the same cities as 40 years ago. So that's not really a matter of architecture, it's a matter of how people are used to certain social behavior. And I think a good cities or well-planned cityscapes can adapt to this change of behavior, or can offer possibilities and capacities. And this, of course, some cityscapes are more inviting, yeah, for staying there and enjoying the place. Some cityscapes are more inviting for passing by. And of course it has a lot to do with the traffic system in the city, whether you are at all allowed to stay somewhere or is it too dangerous. So it's quite complex result of mobility management and architecture of a city in a narrower sense.
And the question is, so the buildings and the cities shapes the behaviors, but how the behaviors can also be shaped by the space. Not, of course, not the physical space, but the atmosphere of the city. So how?
Yeah, the behavior. So of course, the behavior shapes the space, and the space shapes the behavior. So it's a reciprocal relation. But if you have, for example, in Munich we have several historical buildings. They have a strong basement and with a sort of a volume protruding, or like a bench or some stairs. And meanwhile, we have in winter, or especially in the intermediate season when it's quite cold, some days the sun comes and then the sun shines on these sort of public benches, but they were not intended by building those in former times as benches. They were just the basement of the building. And now people use them as sun benches. So this is something which goes hand in hand. So on the one side, the building offers a sort of capability for using it. On the other hand, society has changed that people are allowed to use official buildings in such a way, and they are not kept as on a distance to those. I think this could be an example for how it merges into each other. And maybe I have to jump to another topic which is related. In March we will have a congress about the topic of porosity, and this is maybe one of the features which could be which are so interrelated with the social behavior and the architectural form. So porosity means spaces are not separated but merge into each other. They interpenetrate, and this sphere or these spaces of interpenetration, they are these complex spaces which are somehow influenced by, let's say, for example, the private and the public, or the one institution or the other, or the working place and street place also could be different functions or features which are being connected. And this is something you can encourage by architecture, and this can be used by cultural behavior in the society. And this is something I'm interested in, because it is qualities you can influence by architecture, but of course architecture is not all in the world, so they have to be used or adapted by, or even introduced by societal behavior. And coming back to the rivers, for example, there is something which is in text of sociology quite an old metaphor for this threshold and interconnection in cities, is the bridge. The bridge is something which brings the two sides of a river together, and without the bridge it would be just not even two sides. It was different worlds. And the bridge is the object or the architectural feature which interconnects and is a threshold from going from the one side to the other side. And if you are on the bridge, you're on both sides. Yeah? And being on both sides, but in a special place, this is something which is very interesting in cityscapes and can be encouraged by architectural design.
Nowadays we talk a lot about design thinking to companies, and for example to this startups, so they are always talking about design thinking to develop new projects and new products and new applications and everything. And the design thinking comes from the design.
Mm-hmm.
But we urban designers maybe are not properly using this tool.
Yes, we use it too. There is quite a academic discussion we have since 10 years about design theory. So we had it already in the 60s with the author Rittel and Christopher Alexander, for example. But in those days they were thinking they could make a scientific, rational development out of design. And this somehow stopped. And the discussion now is about the quality of design bringing antagonistic elements, not even, or difference together. And this is the quality of design. And this refers partly back to this 60s discussion when they were saying, when they were talking about the aspect of wicked problems. A wicked problem, this is from Rittel, is a problem which doesn't has a proper solution. A proper solution in the sense of one right outcome, which is a technical question might have the one single outcome to answer the problem. A wicked problem is the category of problems which is open to design solutions, because there's not the right and the wrong solution. Somehow you have to be you have to get a sort of a abductive result or idea. You know, the inductive, the deductive, and the abductive. I think this is the same idea they use in economics and so when they talk about design thinking. And of course, our discipline is, let's say, in the heart of this design thinking. Yeah. And I even tried to establish a chair for design theory here at the faculty, but I didn't succeed. I didn't succeed, unfortunately. I tried.
Today it's like a trend, it's like a fashion.
Yeah,
everybody's talking about this, but I'm not seeing the urbanism, the urban designers talking too much about it.
No, we don't talk much about it. I'm one of the few in this faculty who talks about that. I have 1 meter literature at home about that.
Yeah.
And of course, we in urban design we have always wicked problems. We have always, even we have antagonistic problems. If you go to one solution in the one direction, you have the big problem that you can't have the other problem solved in the same project. Sometimes, but it's the idea is behind the design thinking concept is that you find, at least because there is not the one solution, at least you find the best. Yeah? One which is incorporating these different aspects of the different fields of problematics.
So one project here, my topic is about rivers and cities, and I would like to hear a bit from you. What do you think about the relationship between rivers and cities?
Tremendous important relation, and I've already talked a little bit in the passage now in this interview about the specificity. Of course, I think to be concerned about rivers, it started in this country more about concerning hygienic and environmental aspects. So first in the beginning it was just the hygienic aspect, so to have at least a moderate clean water in these rivers. So that was even started already in the 19th century with sewage system and so on. And then later, in the 60s in this country, the rivers were in a horrible state, totally polluted, because the sewage system for private households somehow worked, but not for industry and for a lot of illegal Einleitungen. And then came, let's say, the ecological turn in this country, or in Europe at all. And slowly, submissions to the river were somehow cleaned. And then in the last step, it was even, the cleaning process was so much improved that the water had to bath in nearly drinking quality. And this is now in the Isar River, we have in this city of Munich, it's in summer period they have this additional cleaning in the sewage plants, and the water is perfectly clean. And then they transformed the river from sort of a channel which brings the water fast as possible down to the next city. So they introduced all these ecological niches for fishes and amphibia and fauna again, and flora of the river bed, and try to re-establish a sort of a river bed flora and fauna again, with the additional quality to have this bathing quality within the city. And this is, of course, very beautiful. And brings a special public life to the city in summer when the river is used like that. And in other cities, they are working on the same projects, but it's always very different, because the river is in each city very special. It's a natural environment, and I'm very impressed, for example, from Basel, where you can swim in the Rhine, which is a great adventure. Because it's a big river, it's very fast, and you can swim, I don't know, 3 or 4 kilometers, and it's clean enough again to swim. And when I was a young girl, this river was so dirty here. But that is an effect of the environmental policy of the EU in the last 4 decades, let's say. But it's again additional. It's a effect of the urban design policy of the cities to use this clean river now as an urban social environment. That's great.
So I could notice that here in Germany, so everywhere of course, but here in Germany maybe the things are more, we can see that more, like the Zeitgeist is very materialized in cities. So for example, in the time of the industries, everything had the same solution, like the city was separated in 4 functions: dwelling, work, transport, recreation, and also the rivers were channelized to serve to immediate functional needs and everything. And so it was about the industrial times. But now maybe we are changing for a digital era or something, so the needs of the people will be different, the lives will be different. So what do you think about the cities of the future, considering this new zeitgeist?
Maybe the new zeitgeist. I don't know whether the new zeitgeist is so homogenic as it has been maybe in industrial times. But if we consider to be now in a postmodern or zweite Moderne or in a reflexive modern times, so it's I don't mind how you define it exactly, but it is all about diversity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we appreciate diversity nowadays. And cities are the places for diversity. This is the quality of cities. And I don't believe everything is about digital in these cities of Munich. The success of Munich is that it is keeping on with the digitalization, but on the other hand it has productive industry still. And this is very important. So they're producing cars, which is maybe on the creates another problem. But it's and for example, if we talk about creative industry, so this is all these people who work with their brain. Then they say the creative industry in this city is so strong because they have a very highly developed small-scale industry or handicraft, or I don't know how it's exact title for these, because they can produce prototypes. Yeah, and this connection between brain and hand is quite strong in the city, and this is very important. And I think this is a city has to consider or to put all their strengths in this to keep this diversity, not only in people but in economy as well. And at least it's something which helps to overcome crises, because crises are mostly in different fields. So if you don't have the totally world economic crisis, but if you have the crisis in this or that car production or something like, which is very strong now. So at least if you have a lot of different fields of economy in a city and of cultural life in a city, so it can substitute. That was, for example, the problem of the Ruhr region in this country, which has only coal and steel in the history. And then in the 70s and in the 80s, first coal was gone, and then steel was gone. So there's still a little bit coal, but it's just more a cultural project than an economic project. So steel was gone second, and then there was nothing there, nothing. So in the 60s they started to found some universities, but they were still quite small, and so that was not a economic factor. And this maybe Munich is quite on a good way because it has all levels of economic production, including a strong cultural economy and these big universities, and so it all belongs together. So it's all about diversity.
Nice. Well, one of the questions I made to myself on this TED Talk conference and everything, so in a time when we talk about diversity and culture and everything and sustainability, how is the shape, how can the cities reflect those values, and how is the shape of the city?
Oh, and I don't believe that the shape of the city unmittelbar directly represents these changes. For example, let's see this quarter here. This quarter is a quarter from the beginning of the 19th century. Yeah, it's 200 years old from the urban design structure. So, but no problem. So it's adaptable enough so that, and cities always change slowly, and so that it can incorporate new developments, and the university grows and takes over some other blocks, and the museums are growing, and the residential plots getting more and more expensive because it's a city near to the city, but it still has a lot of buildings from post-wars period which are quite modest. So it's a good mixture, and it adapts very slowly to, but very let's say very flexible to cultural changes. And this is, I think, these are the strong cities which have this sort of historical structure, but with historical I mean the long period from former times to the post-war and late 20th century period. So it's you have these different quarters in the city, and this quarter maybe adapt to this need, and this quarter maybe to adapt to this need. But you never create a perfect new city for a new Zeitgeist. Yeah. And the most loved cities are which have strong historical features as well, parallel to the vivid contemporary life. And maybe there are some features from different periods of time which resist to adapting to new structures of behavior. I don't know what do we do with the Autobahn if cars are not any longer our transport mean. I don't know, but maybe we have cars in 200 years as well. We don't know today. But they are quite monofunctional for this individual transport system. Very high speed, individual. But can they adapt it to completely another typology? Could be. Huh? At least they could be adapted to automatic driving.
One of the talks that we went invited because of the fellowship was for the Nobel Prize, and he was talking about the blue sky research. But in the introduction he was explaining that he was just telling us some examples of people trying to predict the future. And then it was very funny because he presented us old postcards and everything. And one of the questions that he made was that I don't remember exactly when, but in New York, the urban planners told that the maximum population from New York could be, I don't remember, 1 million inhabitants, I don't remember, because if it were bigger than that, we would have so many caca on the streets that we could not live there anymore because of the horses.
Okay. They couldn't,
because of the horses.
They couldn't imagine another traffic system than horses.
They could not imagine another thing. So that's why it's so hard to predict the future.
It's nearly impossible. You are always thinking from your own state of problems, and somehow transport them in the future. Sometimes people are very, very bright, hellsichtig, bright in their brain. So, for example, I know an essay of H.G. Wells, and he was predicting a future settlement system, and he says the compact city will distribute into a sort of a urban sprawl, and because there is no necessity to be so compact in the city's form, because we will have telecommunication and we will have individual driving, and that he said 1900. Then there was just the automobile, it was just invented. And the production, I don't know when the production, Ford production, or it was even later, I think. And then, and the telegraphy was just invented. So he was really bright, because it has been the effect of these two technical medias.
Nowadays we talk a lot about this compact cities, but sometimes, I don't know, here in Germany, I can talk about Brazilian context, like the urban planners, developers, they use this argument to build even more and more and more and more and more, and then we don't have places to breathe in the city. And so what do you think about the limits of the compact city?
I think again it depends on the location and the environmental conditions. Could be very, very different. For example, here in Munich, I think the city is quite modest in size, and it's in the outskirts it could be compact, more compact than now. So in the middle it's okay maybe, and this part of the city where we are here now, and Schwabing, which is the next one, so they are quite compact, but we have other parts of the city which are not compact at all. But the size of the city is you are used to drive by bike in this city, and you can go everywhere with bike. So it's small enough. Yeah? This, I think, it's a very comfortable size of bigness and compactness. Yeah. And it is a city of 1.5 million, maybe 2 million or 3 million. This is the size of a city which is where I don't have the problem is you can't breathe any longer. Yeah? You have a mixture of compact quarters and parks and the Isar River, and so this is quite maybe in my eyes it's quite successful environmental conditions. But maybe Mexico City or Sao Paulo, so this is completely another category. And if we talk about walkable cities, also these are out of being a walkable city in the size. Yeah. So it's I think you have always to look precise at this city you want to deal with, and then adjust this paradigm of compactness or of densification or of walkability and so on, these specific conditions. Then we can discuss it.
Yes, it's a good topic about gentrification. Sometimes I try to communicate a new kind of city, more related with the nature and with more relationship with the river and everything. And one of the challenges is how to prevent gentrification.
There's no receipt for that,
Yeah,
I think. The answer cannot be to improve quality of the city, because this could be the entrance door for gentrification. So they make it as ugly as possible, then the poor people can live there in this ugly city. This is not the solution. So I think the answer of providing gentrification is not by reducing quality or prohibiting improvement of quality, but is of the means of economic and systematic organization of the real estate industry and real estate maintenance. If this is directly connected to free market system, then of course quality improvement goes to higher prices. If you buffer this with a lot of complicated regulations or reducing the possibility to gain individual economic advantage of improvement, then it can work. For example, when we had this Sanierungsgesetze in Germany, the law of city quarter improvement in the 70s, because the old city quarters had the tendency to get completely rotten. Then this law introduced as well a limit of price development on the real estate plots, on the plots. And this is a question of regulation by law. A society can develop these regulations and introduce these laws to buffer the negative side effect of improvisation. You want to talk about performative urbanism?
Yes.
Yeah, performative urbanism is one of the topics of my chair, and we did this conference and this book some years ago, and it's somehow the backdrop or the background of this book as well. The term performative comes from speech act theory, and that it was invented by Austin, and it's a neologism. And it means speech is representing a meaning. And you are a woman, I'm a woman, so two women are talking with another. If you address each other as woman, we know what it is. In a performative situation, speech creates a new reality. It's not it's not representing, it's creating. And this means, for example, there's a very well-known example. If some people go to marry, then the priest says, now you are married. You are married. He expressed this sentence, and a new reality is existing. A couple, as a married couple, exists. Before it didn't exist like that in this status. And there are a lot of examples from speech act theory. Speech is not only representing, but it is creating. And this is, in the 90s, is, I think, transformed to different cultural spheres. And for example, there's the very famous book of Judith Butler. In German it is Hass spricht, hate speaks. So if you address somebody with hate, it creates this tension in society. So acting produces. So these we transfer to urbanism, and that means somehow addresses the question we discussed before between physical feature of the city and behavior. Behavior in the city as well creates spaces. And if you use the city in a certain way, for example, if our society started some years ago to bath in the Isar is now another type of river in this city. So it's still the river coming from the mountains. It still has blue water in summer and brown water when it rains. And so everything is the same. But in the cityscape, it's a public space. So the behavior creates a new social space and a new physical space. And this interrelation between acting and architectural features, this is addressed by the performative urbanism. And nowadays in the urban theory and urbanistic practice, we focus much more on activities of people in the cities, and of course sometimes we act ourselves with student projects or so. We go somewhere and introduce a temporary space on an open place or something to interfere in a situation. And that is, I'm interested in this relation between strong architecture on the one side. So it's not that architecture doesn't play any role any longer, and everything is just produced by social activities, but I'm interested in the interconnection. Yeah, this performative urbanism is something I'm really very interested in this creating spaces by acting. Jetzt sind wir fertig, oder?
Yeah, unless you want to talk about another point, another topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being here.